My name's Jacinta. I'm your facilitator for this evening. I've been asked by the council to facilitate this meeting. I don't work for the council and I don't work for North East Link. My job here tonight is to get you home on time, but also to make sure that you have the opportunity to ask your questions, So as people are walking in, I'm just going to ask the Mayor, Tom Melican, to do a few formalities before I then tell you about the rest of the evening. So if I could ask Mayor to acknowledge country and VIPs, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jacinta. Welcome everybody, it's great to see you here tonight. I'd also like to welcome my fellow councillors, Councillor Wayne Phillips, Councillor Craig Langdon, Councillor Mark De Pasquale, Councillor Rick Garotti, Councillor Elson Zandigu, and unfortunately Peter Castaldo has had his tonsils out and is away tonight. I'd also like to welcome Jeff Goff, Councillor from Manningham, and Councillor Peter Clark, the Mayor of Nillumbik, is here, and even though we're meant to be warring, obviously we're at peace at the moment, so that's a good thing. So before we start, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Willem people. I'd like to pass on my respects to any elders that may be present. And in case we forget to do it at the end, I'd also like to thank the staff because they have put an enormous effort into tonight and this whole program. So I'd like to thank them now, just in case we get a bit heated later on or a bit excited. So to Fiona and the rest of the staff, I thank you very much. And to Scott, I'd like to thank him very much for organising tonight, and I'm looking forward to a good night. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor. So I just want to make sure that you're all at the right meeting. So I have written up here purpose. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to check in with you, the Banyule community, because there's been some talk already and some information sessions already and lots of media about the North East Link corridor options. So tonight is to check in with you about those options and also to answer your questions. So our first speaker tonight is Sean Smedley from North East Link Authority. And I'd like to welcome Sean to the microphone.
Thanks very much, Jacinta. And firstly, I'd like to thank the Mayor, Tom Melican, and the Council here for inviting us along tonight. We really appreciate it. These sessions are vitally important. One, for you to understand what we're talking about. Two, for us to understand your issues. And three, just so we can all have a really healthy conversation around what is a really important topic and what's an important issue for the community and for the state of Victoria. Essentially, with the scale of the project we're talking about is that important that it's really useful to come here today. So thank you very much to that. I'll go through some slides and I'll probably I'm not going to rush through them, but I'll sort of go through them at a reasonable pace because the sort of the last slides where I can sort of talk a bit more detail about the options and things that we're looking at. But I do hope that most people have already had a chance to look at the newsletters that we've sent, look at the website. We've got more information on the boards around the room. So hopefully you've had a chance to sort of familiarise yourself with that, and we can start talking about some of the other stuff that might not be there. So I'll just flick through the presentation. Can I get the presentation up? Thank you. So just to give you, I guess, a little bit of an update on where things have been going, and we have been undertaking a community survey. There's been an online survey there. That's been open for around 2 months, and we've had fantastic feedback, which has been really useful. So as you see there, nearly 7,500 people have responded. And that's vitally important for us to actually hear that information from the community, be able to take that on board. We thought it was sort of useful to just give a snapshot then of who are the people who are responding. So who is actually talking to us, and that's why we've got some of those numbers up there on the presentation. So as you can see there, 82% of respondents have got 2 or more cars in their household. So we do know that that sort of in the region that is very, very heavily dependent on the car. While we try to push a lot of public transport options, they're simply not an option for everybody, and through the network and the configuration, there is a lot of reliance on the car in the area. People have told us that trucks are their biggest issue and biggest safety concern. People feel unsafe cycling on some of the roads due to the trucks. a very high proportion of people agree that there needs to be a separate route away from the shops and the houses for trips that are just making their way through, and that's an important issue. So especially in this local area that we're talking here and within Banyule, and you're looking at the roads such as Rosanna Road and the like, that carry huge volumes of traffic, but a lot of that is actually passing through rather than local traffic, and so it's understanding what can we do to take some of that traffic away and get them out of the residential streets and away from the shops and the precincts there. The other one there is 69% of people say that they will use local rat runs if the traffic is slow. So with the congestion that's been building up, and we know it's been getting worse in this area, so we are seeing that then that's resulting in traffic running down these local streets and past houses and schools and homes, and we do know that's important to the community as well to try and do what we can to avoid that happening. And people really value the environment. We know that's why people live in this area. You don't live in the CBD, you don't live in the south of Melbourne because you live in this area because you value the environment and you value the community that you have. So we understand that as well. So it's been really useful getting that feedback from everybody. On the survey, it's probably just worth noting that it does close on the 18th of September, so you've still got plenty of time to fill out that survey. So please take the opportunity when you can, if you haven't already, to go online and onto our website and fill out the survey. As I mentioned, we have been doing a lot of consultations, so we've had a number of drop-in sessions, so we've had 10 of those, and we've got a couple more coming up. We've had more than 2,000 people attend. I've been to a lot of them, and it's been a fantastic involvement with the community, an opportunity for people to raise their issues and talk with us and understand a little bit more. But it's also really important for us as the authority to listen and hear from the community what their issues are and what their concerns are. That helps us to better shape the work that we're doing and the analysis that we're doing when we're looking at these corridors. Sort of without going through all the facts and figures, but we do have the website there, and we've got a lot of information. We've had a lot of people visit the website. We've got the newsletters have gone out to 380,000 households. So we are trying to get out to a lot of people and talk to a lot of people and communicate with a lot of people to understand what their issues are. We've had many phone calls and emails, and we're doing the best that we can to listen to everybody's concerns and talk with the community. I guess before we sort of delve into too much more, it's sort of a little bit of, why are we here? What have we heard is, so what the community's been telling us is that everyone is aware of the project, everyone knows about it, and importantly, most of the people that we've been talking to really want this project. I've worked on a few projects like this, and I have to say this is probably the only one that I've really had a resounding sort of view from almost every person that I've spoken to that this project must happen. So we really do take that on board, that there's a lot of support for the project. Now we've just got to get it right, and that's the challenge in front of us. People want the project to solve congestion, they want to get trucks off local roads, and importantly they want to cater future growth, and that's been a message coming through as well. And this isn't just building a road or building a transport solution for today, this is building it for tomorrow and making sure that we do take into account the growth that's happening in Melbourne, particularly some of the growth that's happening in the north of Melbourne, which is placing pressure through this part of Melbourne as trips work their way through. So we understand that, and we're very cognizant of making sure that this is a solution for tomorrow, not for today. We've had a lot of questions around how we maintain local connectivity. If we are putting these projects through and putting freeways through some of these areas, that is a big concern for people, that we're just going to put a road through and sever communities, and that is definitely not the intent of what we're trying to do here. And we are taking on board the issues around local connectivity and ensuring that that will be foremost in our decisions and our work and analysis. A lot of people are wanting to understand traffic modelling, and I've got a background in that, so I'm happy to answer questions on that as we go through. Construction costs, and that's obviously early days at the moment for us to get into detail about construction costs, but we are talking, not mega projects, but beyond mega projects when we're talking the scale of this thing, so it is significant. Population growth, I sort of touched on that before, but that is a concern that people are raising around how are we dealing with population growth and where is it growing and where are they moving to and from. Concern around tolls. Obviously the government has announced this will be a toll road, and so people wanting to understand what does that mean and how does that sit. Obviously, we're talking about tunnels here, and then bushfire evacuation routes is one that's come up in a few of the sessions to sort of put that in front of mind for us to make sure that solutions that we develop have that concern as well. People do want a practical solution, but they want other solutions other than just the road as well. So what can we do with park and ride and other traffic management? So, and I'll touch on that a little bit as well. But again, coming back to the environment theme, people are absolutely critical that we minimise the impact on the environment through any option or any corridor that we do. So to touch on that a little bit more, what are we actually trying to do with the project? And it's really important that we do get your feedback on these next couple of slides. Rather than the feedback on the corridors are there shaped around addressing these objectives and addressing some of the guidelines that I'll go through in a minute. So it's really important that we do understand the objectives we're talking about. Why are we doing this project? So the first one there is to improve business access. And so we're talking about, in that sense, people getting access to business, people getting access to, that one's actually about business getting access to workforce, so making sure that businesses within Melbourne have a greater access to employees and the right employees. The second one is around household access, making sure that households get access to where they need to get to. And that's jobs for a lot of people, but it's also health centres, it's education, it's shopping, it's recreation, it's those kind of things. So making sure that any solution actually tries to make sure that we improve access for households. We want this project, and the objective of this project is also to improve freight and supply chain efficiency. And in that, we're really making sure that we don't develop a solution that doesn't actually work for freight. We need this solution to work for freight, because otherwise we're not going to achieve some of the other outcomes that we want in terms of taking trucks off arterial roads and local streets. But we also want to have this as a productivity gain for the state. And the last objective there, and it's probably one that is critically important for most people in this room, is improving access, amenity and safety for the community in this area. And there's a lot of things that underpin that when we're talking access. It's making sure people can move around the area. It comes back to that local connectivity. But the amenity and safety is really making sure that we try to have a solution that takes trucks off residential streets, has a reduction in congestion, so you can move around, but also the flow-on effects that come from the reduction of freight and congestion, such as some health benefits in terms of noise and pollution that we can try to mitigate with any solution there. So this is really sort of what we want the project to do. This next slide now is sort of how we want it to go about it. So these are the guiding principles that we want to apply to the project as well. And this is really where we want it to minimise impacts on these things. So the first ones that I was going through was how best we actually want it to achieve those objectives, and now it's how we want to make sure that it can achieve those objectives while still adhering to these guiding principles of minimising impacts. So impacts on communities, that's pretty straightforward. Impacts on the environment and cultural assets there. So we're talking around heritage areas as well as some Aboriginal sensitive areas as well. Impacts during construction. These projects do take a very, very long time to build, and this isn't a simple sort of thing that you can knock over in about a year's time. This will have significant impacts during construction, so we need to be cognizant of that and understand what we can do to minimise the impacts on the community during that lengthy construction period. And then the last one is to optimise the efficient use of resources, and in that we're sort of making sure that we are looking at a valued solution. We're not sort of just throwing a lot at it to solve a small problem. We're actually looking at making sure that this is an optimised solution and getting the best value out there. Just to go through a little bit of data, it might be very hard to see on the screen, unfortunately, but I'll try and talk it through. And what I might do is I might sort of flick through these quite quickly, because I'm probably already running close to time. So just a little bit of analysis on traffic and travel demand we sort of thought we would throw up here to sort of understand some of the issues that we're trying to deal with in terms of the congestion in the area and congestion in the community. So it is a little bit hard to see, but there's different coloured dots on the screen and grey lines. What we're looking at is various river crossings. So the two that we've got up there at the moment is Burke Road and also Manningham Road / Banksia Street crossing of the river. The green dots, so they look green to me, but I'm not sure how green they're looking on the screen. On the top half is the origin of trips, and the sort of the bluer coloured dots on the southern side of the screen are the destinations. And this is what we're doing here, is looking at travel and trips during a morning peak, heading southbound across those river crossings. And this is really showing the collection of where the majority of trips are that are making that crossing and where they're going to. And so we've looked at this for Burke Road, and you can see the trips there. We've looked at it for Manningham. We've also looked at this for Fitzsimons Lane, so you can see there again, and it's probably a little bit more of localised clustering there in terms of the origins. It is also fair to say that the origins do extend far beyond what we've been able to show on a screenshot there from this modelling. It does sort of go a long way up into the north, and trips sort of coming down from Yan Yan Road and that type of stuff as well. But there's a collection there, and then the last one there is Warrandyte Bridge. When we put all that together and you sort of try to mash all that into one thing, and looking at where the trips are going to and from, at least in this scenario here, we're looking at the morning. You are seeing a significant collection of trips that are starting in that local area, but also travelling sort of down and various locations. And you can see, I don't know if there's a pointer on this or not, but maybe not. But sort of just underneath the Eastern Freeway there, you can see quite a collection of destinations. So the analysis in this data is really showing that there are a lot of people that are sort of moving across the river, but they're not essentially travelling very, very long distances. A lot of them are still within the area and travelling to sort of south of the freeway to the various employment centres and things like that are around there, and sort of Box Hill and Kew and those areas where there's employment. So we've used this information. This has sort of been pulled together with a lot of survey data and origin destination survey data and travel survey data and journey to work data, and all of that is been pulled together within our transport modelling to use this. And this is a snapshot of today. We've also undertaken this analysis into the future in 2036, and even as far out as 2051 we've done the analysis. This has helped us inform our assessment of the corridor options, which we'll go into, and that's informed some of the information that's in the various documents that have been on the website in terms of the newsletter and the technical summary. So using this information, and this is helping us understand which option or which corridor has the best benefit in terms of taking congestion off the various roads. And you can sort of see there how some of those might perform, and we can talk on that more through the Q&A session. Just a little snapshot of traffic conditions today, and we know that Rosanna Road is a very important road for the community, and one that has been getting a lot of attention because of the very high volumes of traffic that are going along Rosanna Road, and also the high volume of trucks that are going along Rosanna Road. It is sort of acting as the northeast link of today at the moment. That is where a lot of the trips are moving through, sort of Bulleen Road, Manningham Road, Rosanna Road, then that little bit of Lower Plenty and up sort of Greensborough Highway. We do know that sort of route there is really the northeast link of today in terms of the traffic that's moving through there. So just looking at Rosanna Road southbound, what we're seeing there, what this plot is trying to show you is a trend which is not typical around Melbourne. I mean, my background is in traffic and transport, and I can say that there are very few roads in Melbourne that actually have a profile like that stay constant. Typically, you see what I'm about to show you, which is something like Burke Road. So this is Burke Road at the river southbound, and you typically see that peak in the morning where you sort of have a lot of trips that are going through, people sort of going to work, dips off in the middle of the day, and then you have another peak sort of in the afternoon where you have sort of people coming home from work or the like. But if I just go back, and hopefully this works, you don't have that with Rosanna Road. Rosanna Road, it builds up from about 5 in the morning and it stays that way till about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and it is just full the whole day. And that's because it's playing a different function. It's not just dealing with those commuter trips, it's also dealing with those longer trips that are sort of working their way across the network throughout the day. So it's really important that we understand, what's happening with the network. And Rosanna Road is a prime example of an arterial road that's playing a far greater function than it was ever intended to do. Looking at freight demand and the trucks that move through the network, and this is another bit of information which has really helped our understanding of how the various corridor options can perform in terms of taking trucks off the network. I'm probably going to go through this pretty quickly because I want to get to the options. Oh, I've only got a few minutes, then I will go through that, and we might have questions on that. We might be able to bring this up later on. Oops. So looking at the actual options that we're talking about here, and wanting to run through those, You'll all be aware that there are 4 corridor options that we've put forward. It's just important to understand that to develop these solutions, this is not easy. There really is no easy solution. There's no road reservation or alignment that sort of deals with it from end to end. So we've got no easy solution to sort of join one end up to the other. We have a very difficult terrain through here. The topography is quite undulating, it's quite rolling, and it does make it very, very difficult to put a freeway link through. And so we are looking at tunnelling options to protect the environment in that area. But the other point, just to cover off from the start though, is that while we're here and we're looking at these corridor options and we are talking about these as roads, the authority is actually looking at the North East Link as a total transport solution. So obviously a lot of the attention is on the road. It's the big piece of infrastructure that weighs on a lot of people's minds, but we are looking at a total transport solution. So we are looking at how we can integrate this with public transport. And by that I mean, what can we do with the various bus routes that run through this area? How can we improve access to railway stations? What can we do in terms of local improvements to bus networks, such as queue jump lanes and bus signal phases to sort of get buses through quickly? And we're also looking at things such as walking and cycling networks and what we can do to improve those. With any option that we go forward with on this project, there's going to be an absolute commitment that we're going to be looking at any of those solutions on how we're going to have a total transport solution rather than just building a road. That's definitely not what we're about. So in terms of the corridors, I can sort of go through a bit of detail on those, but I'm assuming most people are aware, but Corridor A is around 11 kilometres long from end to end, but with Corridor A, we do need to upgrade the Eastern Freeway. We're not sort of just going to plug a freeway into another freeway and think it's all going to work fine. So we do need to upgrade the Eastern Freeway, so that needs to be taken into account. The initial thinking on that is that it would need an additional lane at least in each direction from Chandler Highway out to about Springvale Road, and potentially 2 lanes in some sections there closer to the interchange. So it's a significant upgrade of the Eastern Freeway with a whole range of other solutions and ITS that would be involved as part of that Corridor A solution. The Corridor B, which is the yellow one there, that's around 24 kilometres long, but also as part of that, it links up with Reynolds Road, and so Reynolds Road, or the Northern Arterial, as some may be aware of, so the Reynolds Road extension, would need to be developed as part of Corridor B. It'll have interchanges at Grimshaw, at Lower Plenty, and at Reynolds Road, and then obviously at either end at Eastlink and at the M80 Ring Road. At Eastlink, the connection is down around Canterbury Road. We have to travel a fair way down before we can deal with it, just due to the infrastructure and the grades of the tunnelling and the structures to actually get the appropriate location to patch in. So we do have to travel a fair way down Eastlink for that. Corridor C is very similar to B at the southern end, so it's got that Reynolds Road, it's got the Northern Arterial connection, it connects down a fair way down Eastlink as well. It's sort of basically identical to Corridor B there, but it takes a different route from Reynolds Road north, and it continues up around and has an interchange with Ryan's Road and also with Diamond Creek Road, and then it does use part of what was a original road reservation, and then connects back with the M80. And then lastly, Corridor D is about 40 kilometres long, so it is quite a significant length, and it sort of travels out in a bit of a different sort of direction and alignment to the others, with connections at Diamond Creek Road, Ryan's Road as well. Then it has a connection out at Eltham, Yarra Glen Road, Maroondah Highway, Mount Dandenong Road, and then back to Eastlink. And that southern section between Maroondah Highway and Eastlink is using the existing Hillsville Freeway corridor, and it uses a little bit of that previous road reservation at the north. None of these options are easy. Each of these options have significant challenges, both in terms of their technical challenges, from an engineering point of view, from a topography point of view, from geotechnical issues that we have to deal with. But also, they've all got issues in terms of acquisitions, and we're not shying away. Any of these options will need potentially acquisitions, sometimes residential, sometimes commercial. So there's no easy solution that avoids any of that. And there's also the impacts to the environment that we're very, very cognizant of, and making sure that we avoid or minimise any impacts there. And that's why a lot of these options you'll see, if you look into the detail, have significant lengths of tunnels, because we have made that decision as the authority to make sure that we are tunnelling where we need to protect the environment, and in some areas to protect houses so we don't sort of go through significant acquisition of houses. I'm probably over time now, so I'm probably going to get the hook. I'll just the last thing just to leave you with. So our commitment, what we're going to be doing, we've undertaken this community survey and these community sessions. We are going to be reporting back to everybody and telling them what we've heard and what the community's told us. We'll explain how we've used that information and how that's informed our analysis and the work that we're doing to pull together the development of the business case for the North East Link. And people have a right to oppose any of those decisions that we make, but we know that people won't be happy with some of the things that we're looking at, and we understand that, and there's concern, there's angst around some of these things, and we completely appreciate that. And we'll try to take as much of that on board as we can to get the right solution. And as I said before, everyone wants the project, everyone that I've spoken to wants the project, but it's about getting the right project. So we expect that by the end of the year, government will be able to announce its preferred corridor, and then the business case that we're working on will be released early next year. And then the idea is that next year would be then spent further refining the design, getting into much more detail, and be able to really talk to people about some of the specifics, some of the more detailed issues that are affecting individuals rather than the broader community. And we'll be starting our planning and our environmental assessments and approvals process, and there'll be significant amount of more communications and consultation as part of that. I'll probably leave it there.
Should we give them a round of applause? Thank you. And I'm sure you've got heaps of questions, so I'm just going to give you a quick opportunity. Check with your neighbour. You could ask the question that you're thinking of asking Sean. Check with your neighbour, is it actually a question or is it a statement? Does your question make sense? And will it add to our knowledge in the room? So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to have a chat with your neighbour about what questions have you got brimming up for Sean. A couple of minutes. You can also write them down as well if you want. Now, so it sounds like you've got lots of questions. That bodes well for the Q&A. And we look forward to unpacking Sean's presentation a bit more in the Q&A. So if I could now ask or invite the Mayor, Councillor Tom Melican, to share his thoughts on North East Link. Thank you, Mayor.
Very much. The North East Link, as Sean said, it is a massive project. It's the biggest project in Melbourne. It's estimated between $8 and $10 billion. And as Sean also said, careful planning and route selection is critical. And that's why Council's having these sessions. You'll also see on your tables there's some options. Council will be distributing a postcard to every resident in Banyule to ask their opinion, and I encourage you to talk to your friends and actually return those. But Sean did talk about the objective of the North East Link, and Council's has supported the North East Link, but it's always been a completion of the orbital link. So, can you? Oh, right. They're going to click for me. Thank you. Council supported an orbital link, so actually completing the ring road, and as we'll talk about later, which option is the best at actually completing the ring road. And when the Premier announced this project, he talked about how it was the efficient movement of freight around Melbourne. So we need to look at which option of those provides the best outcome. We also talked about the best project to reduce the congestion across Melbourne's north, and we'll talk about that as well. But obviously, if you've received this pamphlet, and I think most people would have, it's fairly well stated that A is their preferred option already. But you'd have to argue, does A actually complete the ring road, or does A build a northern freeway into the city? And as Sean said, A is the shortest, and therefore probably the cheapest, but if you include the widening of the eastern into it, A plus the widening of the eastern is actually longer than option B or C. And then we talk about, will it reduce congestion? Well, we're going to dump a freeway onto Bulleen Road, and Bulleen Road right now is full. You can't get any more cars on Bulleen Road. The Eastern Freeway at Bulleen Road is full. They're going to widen the Eastern Freeway from Bulleen Road into Chandler Highway, but we all know that the most congested part of the Eastern Freeway is from Chandler Highway into the city. It is at absolute capacity. Hoddle Street is at capacity. Putting more front cars on the Eastern will not get one more car into Hoddle Street any quicker. So it's fallacy to think that this will actually reduce travelling times if you're going into the city. And if you're not going into the city and you're a truck, well, we all know the Mullumbullen Creek tunnels are 3 lanes. They were the most expensive and controversial section of the East Link project. If we're going to dump another 140,000 cars on the Eastern Freeway and they're heading towards the Mullumbullen Creek tunnel, at some stage they will need to be duplicated. And that's just another massive expense not associated with this option. The other 3 options all join the traffic on the other side of the Mullumbullen Creek tunnels onto the East Link, where there's less congestion and where the traffic will actually flow. So if you want to reduce congestion, you think joining the freeway on the east side of the Mullumbullen Creek tunnel will achieve that objective. And will Banyule be divided in? Well, Banyule will be divided. We're talking about a 6-lane freeway that is divided with emergency stopping lanes and sound barriers on both sides, running from Grimshaw Street to Lower Plenty Road. That's what's in the plan. So that will divide Banyule in half. And is it the best transport outcome for Melbourne? Well, we talk about the freight. Well, I don't think it's the best option for freight, because if we want to move freight efficiently, dumping it onto Bulleen Road is not the very good answer. But then we're joining the Western Ring Road, which is very congested, and we're joining that to the most congested part, or the second most congested part of the Eastern Freeway. You join 2 congested freeways together, you can't expect any of them will actually flow any better. So it's interesting that Sean talked about a total transport solution. All we're looking at is 4 road options. I don't think that's a total transport solution. Next. It's working well. And getting back to the scorecards, if you look at these scorecards, there's certain criteria and they all get a tick for option A, but they're not the same questions for each option. If you actually look at them, you know, why wouldn't you have the same questions for each option? And are the ticks worth as much, you know, each criteria is worth as much as another? Is improving private car travel as important as freight? Is that as important as the public transport option? Is it important as the environmental options? There's no weighting applied to any of these selection criteria, so we need to think that they're all got the same weighting, and they certainly haven't. And option A gets a tick for providing access to La Trobe University Northland Austin Hospital Employment Cluster. It's hard to imagine that a 6-lane divided freeway with sound barriers on both sides running from Grimshaw Street to Lower Plenty Road actually improves access to La Trobe University. In fact, I'd say it doesn't. It actually divides Banyule and reduces the ability. And if you did want to go to La Trobe University and you're in Greensborough, you're going to have to use Grimshaw Street, because that's the only way you'll get across this thing. And then you have to use Watsonia Road, Wungan Street, or go all the way down to Plenty Road to get to La Trobe. So it's limiting the way you will get across Banyule. And it also gets a tick for improving public transport options. If you read the details of that, they're saying option A will widen in the eastern, and one of those lanes could potentially be used for a dedicated bus lane. But if you're going to widen the eastern, you're going to stop any future Doncaster rail option. So by widening the eastern, So widening the eastern for cars and potentially a bus lane and stopping Doncaster Rail forever, is option A actually improving public transport? I don't think it is either. And the environmental impact, it's neutral for option A, all the rest are negative, and that's because they're saying they're tunnelling under the Banyule Flats. Well, the Banyule Creek feeds the Banyule Flats, starts in the army camp right where they want to build their freeway. So if you're impacting on the Banyule Creek, you're impacting on the Banyule Flats and the Banyule Swamp. So, and we can talk about the air vents, but no matter which option, you're going to have air vents, but you know, that will still be a concern. So from an environmental point of view, I don't think option A is actually neutral. And as I said before, a divided Watsonia and McLeod. How will you move around? How will we move around with this barrier running through the middle of our city? Imagine streets like Wongan Street. They'll have to take up what Greensborough Road does now, if this divided thing's there. If the army camp land's not available, then will Greensborough Road become the freeway and there'll be no such thing as Greensborough Road anymore? So will all the side streets that run into Greensborough currently, will they be all blocked? Well, another option is to take a row of houses. So no guarantee the army camp will be available, so other options will have to be considered. What will happen to Elder Street? No matter what happens, whether the army camp's available or not, Elder Street will run into the side of this thing, and so will Yallambie Road. There'll be no access across this thing from those streets, hardly improving access, local access. Erskine Road, Watsonia Road will also be badly impacted. And we talk about land acquisitions, and Sean didn't mention that as well, but if you notice there are little interchanges, little tiny little circles at Lower Plenty Road and Banksia Street. They'll be entrances and exits into a tunnel. How deep that tunnel is will depend how long those exits and entrances have to be. And there's the potential for flyovers as well, so you can actually go across to get into them. The one at Lower Plenty Road will be very disruptive. The one at Banksia Street will be an absolute eyesore. And you imagine that this tunnel will be at its deepest point under the Yarra River at Banksia Street, right where the interchange is. So these interchanges, how far back will the entrance have to be? Potentially, the entrance into the tunnel in Banksia Street could be the other side of Rosanna Road. So what houses will be gone? What other services, what sporting facilities will be gone to enable tunnels to be dug down deep enough to get to this tunnel under the Yarra? It will certainly make a big impact around the Banksia Street. The greenery, those parklands there, they will be impacted. But the interchange is just a tiny little purple dot on the app. So it is a great concern what these interchanges will be. And then we get back to, will this thing be used if it is built? Well, it will be. We could force the trucks down it, but it will be tolled. That's been announced. So during a peak period, if you're paying a toll to go through a tunnel that's going to Bulleen Road, which is stopped, and the traffic banks up through the tunnel, you're not going to be happy to pay a toll, and you'll go and use any other road to get away from it. And outside peak hour, when Rosanna Road's sitting there, very little traffic, are you going to pay a toll to go from Lower Plenty Road to Bulleen Road? And the answer is probably not. People avoid a toll like the plague. So it will be difficult to imagine that this thing will trap people and therefore not generate the money. So, you know, we can talk about the business case, but people hate paying tolls, particularly for short distances. People, once they built CityLink, Springvale Road is back to what it was because people just will not pay the toll. It's a small toll out there and it's a 40-kilometre distance, but people hate paying tolls and will avoid them. And then we can talk about what Rosanna Road looked like. If you read the documentation, they're expecting that the trucks will be in the tunnel because they'll be able to change the definition of the road to force most of the trucks down there. But they're also saying that Rosanna Road will continue to be the over-dimensional route because they won't be allowed in the tunnels. And all placard vehicles like petrol tankers and that will still be on Rosanna Road because they can't use the tunnel either. So Rosanna Road will still be similar to what it is now. So it's hard to imagine the benefits this is going to provide. But what should happen? Well, I don't think it should be a political decision, and we heard about the timing of it. This is all based around the electoral cycle. It's far too an important decision to base it around the electoral cycle. It is the biggest transport decision and it shouldn't be rushed in this manner. Infrastructure Victoria should be an independent review of all the options. Now this state government set up Infrastructure Victoria to be the infrastructure planner for Melbourne's future. They're not looking at this. So why would you have an authority that is independent of government, that is meant to do the infrastructure planning, and they're not involved? And then we look at the way this is going to process. We have the preferred option will be selected, and then they'll go to a business case. What happens if that business case doesn't work? And we can look at what's going on in the west, where they're doing the West Gate Tunnel, where the business case has been doubtful at best, and now it's not being released, but they're saying it's a positive business case, but it's not being released. And that was a project devised by Transurban, taken to the government by Transurban, being built to make a profit for Transurban. So will we be denied the business case for this? Will decisions be made to enable a company to make more profits? Or will we see the business case and we'll see the benefits of this? I don't think so. My concern is the decisions will be based on what provides the best outcome for a private company, because then they will be prepared to put more money into it and let the government off. And therefore, it will not be the best transport outcome for Melbourne. And what do we need to know? What's going to happen to Rosanna Road for the next 10 years while this thing's built? There's massive safety problems now, and you can see that it does. Rosanna Road is a capacity now. Why it goes across in a straight line is you can't get another car in it. That's why it doesn't get any worse. You can't get another car in it, and it's like that for 14 hours a day. It's going to stay like that for 10 years. And once a project is built, Rosanna Road will be continued to be like that, because traffic in Melbourne is growing by 2% a year, 60,000 extra cars a year in Melbourne. Rosanna Road will continue to be like that unless there's a commitment as part of this project they'll narrow Rosanna Road and return it back to what it should be, but I doubt that will happen. But the big problem is that the cheapest option is not always the best, and we all know that. If we build this project, option A, it doesn't do the job, what do we do then? Do we go and build another one? Well, it's hard to imagine we'll have the money to do that. So if we make the wrong decision, we're stuck with it. And that's, well, very disappointing. Well, shattering, I think. If you think about it, if option A is chosen, Banyule will never be the same again. As I said, what should happen? Infrastructure Victoria should be in the decision-making process, should do an independent review of each option, and should make recommendations to the government, should take the politics out of it. We've seen what happened with East West, when $1.1 billion was lost because it was a political fight. We could get to that stage again. We don't want to see that. We want to see the best decision. Should not be rushed. It shouldn't. The electoral cycle should have nothing to do with this decision. This is Melbourne's future we're talking about, not the future of the government. So we should make sure we get it right. And the decision should be based on the best transport outcome for Melbourne. And I know it's good to see the Mayor of Nillumbik here, but this fight shouldn't be about who's got the best parklands and whose residents are more concerned. This should be about the best transport outcome for Melbourne, and our parks are just as valuable as their parks, and our residents are just as important. And the other thing we need to look at, once this project is finished, will Banyule be a better place? Will our congestion problems be solved? And will Banyule be divided? So thank you for coming tonight. Hope you can get involved, and I look forward to the panel session.
Hard act to follow. Hard act. You brought your own Greek chorus. Just kidding. So I thought the 9th of September was the most important date because that's when the Cats play the Tigers. But It's the 18th of September. There's heaps of information. That's when you need to do the survey if you haven't done it. That was from one of Sean's points. It's fantastic that you can all clap so loudly because I'm going to do something with you at the end of the night and I need you to applause, which is great. And lots of energy in the room bodes really well for enthusiastic questions and lots of questions. And I encourage you to take this opportunity to ask questions and unpack some of the information that you've heard or that you've read. And if you haven't, some people don't like asking questions, some people don't like talking into a microphone. And hence, while I just remind you about respect, if you've come to a public meeting, you've never been to one, good on you, and you're dying to ask a question, but you're a bit shy, if we can all please just continue to maintain respect for people who want to ask a question and might be struggling with the environment. There's also over there a wall where you can write your comments, you can put a sticky dot, and don't forget the survey. So we're going to open to questions now from the floor, and I just want to check that everyone from council has their microphones. Looks like we're getting them now. So bear with us while we get that. While they're getting the microphones, check with your neighbour if the question that you have is actually a question, because we want to add to everyone's information in the room. We don't necessarily need any more statements, but questions would be great to add to the information in the room. So it's really hard for me to see with these lights, so I'm going to have to rely on my council friends. This lady put her hand up first, but I'm going to jump around the room, and if you could please be patient with me and respect my efforts to try and get to all of you, that would be great. And we have lots of time for questions. So, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question for Sean from, is it Nella? Why is Corridor A, the environmental impact, neutral? In Corridor C, it's a negative. Both have tunnels underneath sensitive areas, so it seemed like it was loaded against Corridor A. The next question is...
Two questions.
When
Would you like him to answer the first question?
I just thought maybe I'll do the questions.
All right, we'll try and limit it to one question each because there's a lot of people in the room. Thanks.
So when the numbers are crunched, will the tunnels go as a cost-cutting measure? So that's my question.
Did you get those questions, Sean? You've got two.
I did. I'll answer the second one first, and then I'll hand over to Katie to actually answer the first one.
My bad. I knew I'd do something wrong. I didn't introduce the panellists. Will you forgive me, Sean? Can I? I'm going to get into lots of trouble if I don't do that. I'm really sorry. Sorry, panellists. We have the Mayor you've already met and Deputy Mayor Di Pasquale, remember? Excuse me. Mark Di Pasquale, the Deputy Mayor. We have Katie Watt from North East Link. We have Vince Panano, the Jude from Vic Roads. And we have Scott Walker from Banyule Council as well, and Sean Smedley you've already met. My apologies, panel members, sorry. Okay, so Sean can now answer your question. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, look, just to answer the second part of that question, in terms of the tunnels, what you'll have seen on the website, on the newsletter and the various material is a minimum length of tunnel that we are committing to. So as part of the information that we're putting out there, we're saying as a minimum, those sections will be tunnelled. So we're not looking at a cost-cutting exercise to cut the length of tunnels that we've put out there. That is the commitment that those are the minimum tunnel lengths. And just before I hand over to Katie, if you indulge me just for a minute, I just want to clarify a couple of things that Tom mentioned in his presentation. I wouldn't want to leave anyone here with an understanding that wasn't what we're committed to. So I'll just go very, very quickly. But Tom, you mentioned dumping traffic onto Bulleen Road. I just want to absolutely clarify. Corridor A does not dump traffic onto Bulleen Road. Corridor A actually is separate to Bulleen Road, either through tunnel or structure above or below. It doesn't actually use Bulleen Road as the freeway. It actually does something up or down and connects through. And there's a lot of things that I could talk to, but I just wanted to make sure that one was critically clear. The other one was around the Doncaster Rail, and one other thing is we are talking about the Eastern Freeway and the widening of the Eastern Freeway or upgrade of it. And the other thing is we are committed to is making sure that anything that happens there does not preclude Doncaster Rail. So no traffic lanes will be put in the median of the Eastern Freeway. We would look at things around buses.
Excuse me, could you please let Sean answer his question, and I'll get to you with your questions. Thanks.
There is no median past
Please
Bulleen
write
Road,
it
you're
down.
correct, but
Yeah.
from Bulleen Road into the city, there is the median, and that's what we would make sure we protect. That's what's been looked at protecting for the rail, and so we would make sure that we're not going to take up that space. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that this project isn't going to preclude Doncaster Rail. This project for Corridor A is not going to dump traffic onto Bulleen Road. The other thing is that this project, in terms of the division and use of the roads, we are committed to making sure that local access is provided. We are committed to making sure that we don't sever communities. Yallambee Road will still connect through. Looking at what you could do with Elder Street. The main thing that we want to actually get across is that this isn't going to be a freeway with noise walls and complete severance. We would think that this opportunity with this project would actually give the opportunity to reduce some of the severances already there by providing connectivity from one side across the other, and absolutely maintaining local connectivity, so everyone that makes their trip patterns today would still be able to do the same in the future with the project.
Excuse me. I'm sorry, could you let Sean answer the question?
I was
Yeah.
That's fine. I was just providing clarity, but I take your point. I'll hand over to Katie now. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
So, as our brochure points out, all options have environmental impacts. Building a big bit of infrastructure like this will have impact. We've rated the options comparatively around the areas that they go through and also their length. So none of them are rated positively, as you've noted. But why does the option A get negative neutral, and the others have more impact? It is inherently in the length of those options. So we have put all tunnels to go under the Yarra, as recognising the sensitivity of the Yarra River.
Okay, Mel, you have a gentleman there with the glasses and, yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jacinta.
Oh, well done.
Sean, thanks for your presentation. With the two options A and C both using tunnelling, as environmentalists, I feel we need to have a hard look at where the waste is going to go. I know we're nowhere near that yet, which will happen in 18, but it's huge. Any thoughts on that, please, Sean? Thank you.
Yeah, look, it's a very good point. So with any tunnelling, you have huge amounts of tunnel spoil that needs to come out of the tunnels for that to work. And you're right as well that we're sort of not at that level of detail at the moment. But there is, I guess, a number of quarries around Melbourne that have been developed over time that often call out for spoil, so they can fill those in and redevelop. There's various other projects around Melbourne that will need spoil. In terms of the spoil that comes out, unlike some of the other projects where we have noted that there's significant contaminants in the soil, we don't expect that to be a high factor here. There's always the chance of some in some areas underneath service stations and the like, but we're not actually expecting much contaminated soil coming out of the ground through any of the corridors that we're looking at. But finding the right spot to put that spoil is absolutely an issue, and especially when we've got so much going on with the Melbourne Metro tunnels and the Westgate Tunnel, there's going to be a lot of soil going around. So if someone wants to build a big mound in the backyard, let us know, and we've got some soil for you.
Okay, Mel. Oh no, sorry, this gentleman here. Thank you for reminding me. Yep, thank you. Then Mel. Yep. Then back to this. Then there. Then back to this. Okay.
Thank you very much. The question is, why has Corridor A been presented as only 11k, therefore supposedly the shortest and the cheapest option, when in fact the distance travelled, if necessary upgrades to the Eastern Freeway to make this option work are included, is actually 29k, and the potential cost, if upgrade works between Chandler Highway and Springvale Road are included in cost, would make this as expensive or potentially more expensive than options B, C and as much as D, furthest to the east. And effectively we are looking at a situation where that upgrade might, as Tom touched on, be done by a private-public partnership and therefore get the costs off this project. So if you can address that question, first of all, the way the options have been presented, and B, the way that section of the Eastern Freeway, which is absolutely integral, essential to make this option work, is going to actually be done.
Sure. So I guess the way the options were presented was to look at the core part of the project of the North East Link. And you're absolutely right. Corridor A does need an upgrade of the Eastern Freeway. I mentioned that in the speech, in the presentation. That does need to be taken into account with Corridor A in terms of its total length. But in terms of cost, we've never publicly put anything out about costs. We're not at that point yet. You will have seen costs floating around, and you know, you're absolutely in your rights to believe those costs came from us. They haven't. A lot of newspapers have come up with their own costs and put those out. A lot of people have been talking about costs. We're not at that point at the moment to be talking about costs of projects. So the Eastern Freeway is absolutely important and is vital to be included as part of Corridor A. But equally, the Northern Arterial Reynolds Road extension will need to be included as part of corridors B and C, because that's also a significant length that would need to be built to enable those options to function and to work. And to the second part of your question around how can we be sure that the public-private partnership won't sort of scale back on some of the scope that's required and needed, I think one of the things that you should be able to take comfort out is the process that we go through will absolutely lock down the scope that is required. So, as I mentioned, next year, once we have a business case approved, should it come out as favourable and being approved by government, then we'll go into the environmental effects process where we actually do all the planning and the approvals. And as part of that process, and Katie can talk to more of that process being the expert in that area, we'll actually end up with a whole bunch of absolute stringent requirements, and a lot of that can be around scope and connectivity. So we won't sort of allow bits and pieces of scope to be chipped away by another party trying to reduce cost. They're actually set as full requirements as part of an approval process. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add.
No.
Thank you, Sean. So Mel, you have someone, then I'm coming back over here with Michelle, and then I'm coming back to this lady here with glasses, but excuse me for using things like that. Yep, good.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm not in favour of any of the options, and I don't think Melbourne should be 8 million people, and I think there's lots of other ways to deal with the problems we've got with trips. In Banyule, we have to go over the river to get a school. We need a school here. That'd save a lot of trips. So there's other things to do, but I think the process has been fantastic, and I've been to some of the sessions and talked to the experts, and I think they're all really experts and doing a good job at what they're doing in the investigation. And a lot of good information's coming out of this that we can all use. You started to talk about
Could you get to your
plans
question?
on the
Yeah.
screen, and I'm wondering, are they available on your website, the one that you left off talking about because you were running out of time? And also the geology work that you're doing. That's all very scientific work, and how available will that be to the public? Because I think there's been a lot of public experts go along to the sessions as well, and I think we're getting a lot out of it listening to those other experts. So I'd just like to know that we can get all the information as people who live in Victoria, please.
So 2 questions about information. Thank you, Sean or
Yes.
Katie. Yep.
So I guess in terms of the information and the information that I may have skimmed over in the presentation, that is all available online. So if you go on to the North East Link Authority's website, there's I think it's a publications tab, and right towards the bottom you'll see some links, and one of those is to a technical summary, which is a report that looks like this. There's a huge amount of information in that report that you can get online, and the slides that I went through in terms of the one around the freight is in there, so absolutely you can get hold of that. In terms of the geotechnical information, I'm sure that we'd have no issue in providing information. It's probably just a matter of logistics and how we do that. So we do collect a huge amount of the geotechnical information and core samples, and we do a lot of scientific analysis on those. I'd have to sort of come back to you on how that information may be made available, but you know, as an authority, we've got nothing to hide, and we're sort of going through that analysis and digging that information out. Once the analysis has been complete, I'm sure that'll be made available. And that sort of goes to the same with a lot of this stuff. I know people are desperate for information, and we want to see this and we want to see that analysis. As it comes to hand, we are trying to put information out there. We do have people on our social media team that are sort of putting information on Facebook and Twitter and those things as well to provide information as analysis comes to hand. But obviously, the bulk of it will be sitting within the business case when that's released next year. And on Tom's point, the government has made an absolute commitment that the business case will be made public, and the Westgate Tunnel business case is actually made public in 2015. So both of those business cases are, well, that business case is out there, ours will absolutely be made out there, and there'll be huge amounts of information as part of that for everyone to pore over.
Thank you, Sean. So here we have two gentlemen, or one, who's been waiting patiently. Red collar, I've called you on my list. What's your question, please, sir?
My question is this, Jeff. My question is this: will the entire length of all of the alternatives be free of traffic lights or intersections from the start to the finish? And will option A be tunnelled all the way through, under the Yarra, through to the Eastern Freeway and only come to the surface at the Eastern Freeway?
So on the first one, I think I'm answering all the questions here at the moment. Who wants to jump in? But for the traffic signals, absolutely. That is the 100% commitment that we're talking about, and that comes into linking the freeways and making sure. So any of these corridors that we're talking about, it will be freeway travel without signalised intersections from either the Eastern Freeway or Eastlink through to the M80. So no traffic signals at anywhere along their length. Getting onto them, obviously, you will, and there'll be, the ramp metering and ramp signals, as you do see on some of the freeways today, to manage flow onto the freeways, which is a modern part of freeway operations. So that'll be there. But once you're on the link, no signals all the way through. The second part of the question. The tunnel length, sorry. Look, it's probably a bit too early to talk about in terms of that tunnel length. What we have said as the absolute minimum commitment on Corridor A is that the tunnel would be from Banksia Manningham up to Lower Plenty. So on the south side of Banksia Manningham, so the portal would be on the south side of that, not impacting on anything on the north side of Manningham or Banksia, all the way through to the other side of Lower Plenty. How long the tunnels may then go for beyond that is I guess, further work and analysis being done. So we've put forward there that minimum commitment because of the potential environmental impact. How far you would take it down to the Eastern Freeway is I guess, a matter of further engineering and detail that has to be worked through. But it is fair to sort of say, look, there are options there to take it all the way through, and there's also options to do to other solutions, maybe structure or not. But there are engineering challenges with anything that you do in that area.
Thank you, Sean. I've got a lady here and then one down the back, and then I have to go to a man in a purple vest, right? And then I'm going back to Sanjeev, and then there's a man over here with, pink top, and then there was glasses and hat. Can someone keep me honest? So Fiona, Michelle, Sanjeev and Mel, you have to keep me honest. Did you remember that order? All right, let's go. Yeah.
Now I'm switched on. You've clearly stated that the surface area of the Banyule Flats will be protected by tunnelling beneath the reserve. How can you ensure that the tunnel and road works, which will disrupt the flow of Banyule Creek, will not disturb the water table and result in altered surface hydrology for the wetlands?
So when we do our environmental studies in the next phase of work through the Environment Effects Statement, which will be the process that we undertake next year, which will take most of the year, 10 to 12 months, we will look at a whole range of things. We look at the groundwater table, we look at the surface water table, and surface water, I should say, and not just where the water flows and how the water floods, but also the quality of creeks and how to protect those. We're also guided by legislation as well, so the Environmental Protection Act and State Environment Protection Policies, which all govern around management of water quality, surface water and groundwater. So we will look at all of that. We're also working with Melbourne Water on all of our options at the moment, all of the corridors, how they interact with different surface water conditions and also with the groundwater. Melbourne Water collects a lot of that data across their area that they manage, so we're getting all of that, collecting all that, and that will feed into the studies in the next phase. We're also using all that now, as much information as we can, to inform our options assessment.
Now, thanks, Mel. Thank you for
Thanks, everyone. For me, the biggest factor for the community is solving the crisis with the hundreds of over-dimensional trucks which travel on Rosanna Road each day. Is Nella going to actively consider options that will solve the issue of over-dimensional trucks, including recommendations on legislation changes? And the second part of the question, in some of the options have been marked down based on steep gradients of over 4%. As recently as the Mullumballum Tunnel, the acceptable gradient has been up to 6% with an operating speed of 80 kilometres per hour, and that tunnel is 5.5%. And I've asked truck drivers and they've had no problems driving in and out of that tunnel. So considering that, and I've read that Nella is adopting new standards for this upcoming road, and considering these new standards would have ruled out the current Mullumballum design, will Nella consider opting for these standards if it means credible options such as B and C are ruled as negative or marked down for freight?
Okay, there's a few parts.
Yeah,
there's a few parts. I'll do my best, but prompt me if I go off track. The first one around over-dimensionals, it's a good point, and look, it's one thing that we are faced with any of the solutions that we go through. So be it corridor A, B, C or D, because each of them have tunnelled solutions as part of them, means that we just physically can't contain the over-dimensional trucks. So while there has been the concern around corridor A will just result in over-dimensional trucks continuing on Rosanna Road, it's exactly the same for B and C and D, if not even a little bit worse in that where they can actually use at least part of corridor A for part of the length. The others, they just wouldn't, because it's too far out and they have to cut back through because they actually can't travel through the tunnels. But the point you make about making sure that there is a solution there and we don't sort of just walk away and forget about the over-dimensionals is absolutely important. And anything to do with the business case, with any solution that we come up with, we'll make sure that there's a strategy on what needs to happen with the over-dimensional vehicles and the placarded loads as well, to make sure that we understand what the problem is and that there's a solution in place or a strategy for a solution in place should any option proceed, so that we don't just walk away and say, well, over-dimensions is someone else's problem. We'll make sure that there is a strategy there identified on how we can actually deal with that as an issue.
Sorry, just before you leave that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you can turn, thank you. Just before you leave the question on over-dimensional trucks, I think it's probably worth clarifying that when we talk about over-dimensional trucks, typically they are trucks longer than 30 metres in length, or they're carrying loads and they're 5 metres wide or 5 metres high, so they're actually under an escort. And just to put a bit of perspective, over the last 12 months, we had about 30 loads under escort for an over-dimensional truck on Rosanna Road. So that just gives you a sense of the scale of over-dimensional. All other vehicles don't need to happen under permit. So those over-dimensional trucks happen under a permit sort of situation. And that just gives you a sense of scale. There were about 30 under escort in the last 12 months.
Thanks, Vince. That's important. Because the other ones that other than the ones that Vince mentioned, when the heights are lower of the trucks, they can go through the tunnels. So regardless of the permit, if they are low enough, they can fit through the tunnels. The issue around the grades is also a good one. And yes, absolutely, the criteria that we're looking at these options with at the moment is the current design criteria to make sure that you have efficiency for trucks. Previous projects haven't got that through. And there's many examples all around Australia, all around Victoria, of where we're not meeting that criteria for various roads that trucks do use. But what we're trying to do at this point is make sure that we get an absolute best solution to encourage trucks onto this link and to make it as efficient and possible as we can. Now, those other roads that you talked about, Mullumballum tunnels, for example, and CityLink has steep grades. Part of the issue there is, so CityLink is a real issue for trucks, and they do travel a lot slower, and they still use it because there isn't really an alternative. But it is an impact to other cars and congestion, but also to the trucks. In the Mullumballum tunnels and the Eastlink tunnels, I always forget what the other one's called. The grades there, while they're at that steeper grade, closer to around 5%, it's actually over a shorter length. And one of the things that we've looked at in terms of the criteria that we're analysing these options by isn't just the steepness of the grade, but it's how long they're at that steepness. because if they're longer than 900 metres, going at that steep gradual increase, that's when they really start slowing down. That's where the trucks are slowing down, and they're dropping speeds. And some of these things, they can drop as low as 40 k's an hour on some of these inclines. So I think it's also a bit of how the industry has evolved, and typically we have designed these projects for just the common fleet, what is the common vehicle out on the network. But in the last 5 to 10 years or so, the engineering industry has been getting a lot smarter and making sure that we do design some of these major projects around other parts of the fleet, and making sure we do take into consideration things such as freight, especially when we're trying to develop solutions to get freight off other roads and make it attractive for them.
I think that strengthens the case why A is not the answer. As Sean just said, modern freeways are designed to handle large over-dimensional vehicles and placarded vehicles. So if option A is the answer and placarded vehicles and over-dimensional vehicles can use it to save the residents on Rosanna Road, they'll get to the eastern, turn left and not be allowed to go through the Mullum Creek tunnels. So if you can design a new modern link that can handle oversized trucks and placarded trucks that joins the eastern on the other side of the Mullum Creek tunnels, you will keep these trucks off residential streets. And when Vince, and I don't want to pick on Vince because he's my friend, but then when he says there's 30 escorted vehicles going down Rosanna Road in a year, I think if you live in Rosanna Road, you realise there's many, many more than that. They are just not registered.
Tom, sorry if I can just to clarify, I mean, these are, what I'm talking about over-dimensional, these are vehicles under escort. I'm not talking about general trucks that can use the network. Absolutely there are, but these are vehicles under actual escort with pilots and the like, so it's a distinction. I think it's important to make that distinction.
And just for clarity, I wasn't saying that this project would cater for placards or over-dimensionals. When I was talking about the design, that was for grades, so grades only. The placards and the over-dimensionals that we're talking about would not use any tunnel.
So I think we can now move on to the next question, which this person has been waiting patiently with the hat. Yep.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Karen. I'm a school crossing supervisor with Banyule City Council. I literally stand on that road every single day on Rosanna Road, and I witness so many near misses, so many accidents, and for the safety of my own life, trying to save these kids. A lot more kids are now crossing that road, so I'm concerned. I see a lot more long loaders and B doubles go through streets, go through the red lights. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous here. Go through the red lights, and I'm concerned that this road needs to be built as soon as possible. Couple of questions I had.
Please respect the questioners. Thank you. Have you
couple
got
of questions that I had was, is there a possibility for this ring road to be built and complete? Are there original plans for that in place, and the land that was allocated for it 10 years ago to be done? I feel like corridors A and B have been designed poorly, but if the federal government or the state government or the federal government could agree to this east-west link, it would take a lot of cars and trucks and buses off Hoddle Street, and they could go directly to the western suburbs where the freight needs to be done. So is that a possibility as well? Or build a freight line to take all these trucks off the road?
I lost track of how many questions there were.
So
Have you
I think there was two.
Thank you.
In terms of the land, there isn't any, unfortunately. My understanding was that there was some land that was set aside some time ago, but it was sold off in previous governments, unfortunately. And look, that's an absolute shame, because that would have made things a lot easier. But unfortunately, and it's happened all over Melbourne. Unfortunately, there's a lot of those reservations don't exist anymore, which is why we have significant challenges that we do. Any of these projects that we do now have these significant challenges because we are a mature city. We are developed, and these corridors that were there aren't there anymore. So we do have this struggle of trying to fit in significant infrastructure within the community. In terms of east-west, I mean that's obviously a separate political conversation, which we can't get into. But our analysis is showing it is sort of serving different catchments, and they are serving sort of slightly different purposes. So I probably can't get into too much more detail than that. But I think they are looking at different issues. Yeah.
Okay, I have to defer to the Mayor. Sorry, you have to wait for your questions, please. Yep.
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course you can. Yep.
You're exactly right. I've stood on those intersections and it is appalling. And some of the things that Council and Resolve Rosanna Road people have been asking Vic Roads to do for a long, long time, which is virtually no cost, is to lower the speed limits on Rosanna Road to 40 k's. And if you look at that profile, you can't tell me by lowering the speeds on 40 k's anyone's not going to get through the set of lights at Rosanna Road or Banksia Street, because the queue is so long anyway. All that happens is people get to the front of the queue and at a set of lights, speed off, and then just get to the next car a little bit quicker. Lowering the speed limits to 40 k's on Rosanna Road would actually improve throughput, not reduce it. And Vic Roads will tell you the same thing, because at lower speeds you need less distances between each vehicle, therefore you actually increase the throughput. And we'll also ask for red light cameras, because you're right, big trucks come flying so fast they can't stop, they just go through. Red light cameras haven't been installed, but red light cameras on Rosanna Road would actually make money for the government. I don't see why they don't do it. And the other thing, that if you've ever been on Rosanna Road and seen two trucks heading in the same direction side by side, they don't fit in the lanes. They bump against each other. Two trucks on the other side, and I think if you look at Resolve Rosanna Road's websites, they've got film of trucks that don't fit in the lanes having to stop and wait for other trucks going the other way to go past. So banning trucks to one lane each way would not reduce the throughput, would make it safer. Red light cameras would make it safer, and 40 k's would make it a lot safer, and that doesn't cost much money, but it hasn't been done.
Thank you. So you think North East Link is complex. You try keeping a track of the people who want to ask questions. I might have to ask the Mayor to hold back a bit sometimes so that your constituents can ask their questions, if I may. He is very good, but there's lots of questions in the room, and this is a great opportunity to ask them. So, Sanjeev, you have someone for me down there, and then I'm coming back to Michelle. Two people have been waiting here. We're taking two from this side. Yeah.
Hi. My children go to Banyule Primary School, where it looks like the Option A tunnel will go directly under it, according to your map. And I'm wondering, with the 4 kilometre tunnel, will there be a pollution stack in the middle of it, or how will the pollution get out of the tunnel?
Excuse me. With any tunnel, depending on the length, but the lengths that we're talking about, will need some form of ventilation structure. Typically that's at either end on sort of essentially the outbound tube and near the portal. So that would be sort of where the tunnels start and end, and we haven't sort of defined that. We've said the minimum length, and that could be a lot longer than that. But we're not talking about any sort of midpoint type of ventilation or mid-tunnel intakes. That wouldn't be required. That's technically not required on the solutions that we're talking about. Some of the options, such as on corridors B and C, we do actually have some quite longer lengths of tunnels. We don't believe, again, from the analysis that we've done, that you'd need to have a midpoint ventilation structure for the fumes to come out. You may need to have a mid-tunnel air intake, which is very small, and it's just it takes fresh air into the tunnel. It's nothing comes out. On B and C, it's a possibility. We haven't sort of gone through that next level of detail yet. But I think for the question that you're asking, I don't, without knowing the specifics of where you're talking, I don't believe there'd be a need for a structure near that area.
Can I add something to that though? When we do the environment effects statement next year, air quality is one of the studies that we will do. And when we do that, we will build a meteorological model, we will look at air movements, and we will model the heights and the dispersion of anything that's, any ventilation structure that's proposed, and we will comply with the Environmental Protection Act and the State Environment Protection policies around air quality. So it'll be studied in a lot of detail when we get to the next phase of the planning work.
Thank you, Katie. I have two questions on this side. Man in purple vest was next and black hat, white-haired lady here. So, I do have a list. You just have to be patient. I'm so sorry. And in fact, that might be a reason we can succinct the answers down, but also keep your questions as succinct as possible would be great. Then we can get through this list. So here we have two questions for people who've been waiting. That man and, yep. I think someone else, yep.
Charles here. So I had a question that focuses on the Middle Yarra corridor and option A on the potential interchange where it comes up on the corner of Bulleen Road and Manningham Road, and the extension all the way down along that corridor as it executes down at Manningham Road and Bulleen Road. My question is particularly, at the moment the state government have put together very good Yarra protection principles, and that corridor that moves literally around the Heidi area right down to the Bollen area is due for cultural upgrade. So that's the work that's being done by government at the moment, and my question is there a conflict if you're not extending at least that tunnel right through to put in a massive freeway over the top? What happens to Heidi Gallery with how far back it goes? What happens to the Bollen side? What happens to all the schools up and down there, the Veneto Club? Just wondering about the impact of that and if it's being thought about.
Thank you.
Wow, there's two aspects that you want to cover.
I'll talk about the Yarra River Protection Bill and the Yarra River Strategic Plan, which I think is what you touched on. So we are very well aware of that and the principles of that bill. That bill is still going through Parliament at the moment. We are working with Melbourne Water on their plans for the strategic assessment that they're doing and all the consultation they're doing on that. We're also talking to the Wurundjeri people about Bollen wetlands and understanding the stories and the history of that area as well, and protecting that area. That is one of the most significant sites for the Wurundjeri people in that area, and that is a no-go zone for us. So protecting the environment in the way we deliver this infrastructure is very important, and that's what the Environment Effects Statement process will do for whichever corridor we select. Part of it will be minimising impact. An Environment Effects Statement allows the Minister to assess, or the Minister for Planning, to consider the way infrastructure is delivered and whether the impacts are acceptable overall for the community at the end of the day. So protecting things like the Yarra River is really important. That is why the government has committed to the Yarra River Protection Bill and is why we're looking at tunnels under the Yarra in that location.
Thank you. Now, first we're going to Purple Vest. And then I have to do, Mel's got 4 or 5 people waiting, and you're going to have to work through them, whoever's been waiting the longest, I think, and Sanjeev, and then back to here for this second row. Yeah. Yep, please. Thanks for your patience. Yep, you're on the list. Yep.
I'm purple vest, apparently. But,
yeah, apparently. That's what I see. Yeah, sorry.
I've heard a lot about Corridor A this evening. My question is double-barrelled, but it's not technical. With all due respect, I would like to ask the Mayor if he's the Mayor of Banyule or the old city of Heidelberg, because there's been no mention of Corridor B during this evening. So my question is, has Corridor B been added as a compromise deal between Nillumbik and Banyule? Because Corridors B and C seem to serve the same business model. Who suggested it, and when was it added to the mix?
I know.
You want me to answer that one?
I can answer.
It
Must admit, when option B was first presented and I first got my thing, I was shocked to see option B because no one had ever talked about it, no one ever mentioned it. It was a complete surprise, and I can't speak for Nillumbik, but Banyule Council had no idea, no input or no understanding of what options were going to be presented. We were very keen to see them, but when option B came out, I was quite shocked, and we had no input, no West.
No, Fiona.
Because if you look at the way the brochure is being presented, they are clearly saying they want option A. And I wanted to point out what option A does to Banyule, and my belief that option A does not achieve the objectives of completing the ring road.
Okay, Sorry, we don't have
Can I
time
just-
for a debate. It's got to be.
Can I just
questions.
answer,
Yep.
because
Please,
in
Sean.
terms of people saying where did option B come from, I
Yep.
can actually say where option B came from. So,
That'd be wonderful.
so the direction that we were given from government was wipe this slate clean from all the previous stuff that's been looked at and actually sort of look at every option and throw all options on the table and make sure that you sort of look at every possible option. And we did that. But there are obviously some that stand out. Obviously, Corridor A stood out. Corridor C has been looked at before in previous studies, and that stood out. When we were going through the analysis and looking at where you could actually develop a corridor, we don't consider council boundaries. We don't care about council boundaries. We care about the impacts to the community and making sure we have a solution that actually gets the right outcome. So there's absolutely nothing about looking to sort of avoid any council areas or anything like that. I can absolutely say with a fact that was not a consideration. But what we actually did is tried to look at, well, how could we actually essentially have a hybrid between B and C, A and C. And so that's why Corridor B, it sort of follows the same alignment as A at the start to Grimshaw, and then cuts across and joins up with where Corridor C goes. And it was really sort of trying to see, okay, we've got these various alignments. Is there one that could cut in the middle to actually do something different? That's why we looked at it. So, no, it was a different option. I wouldn't say it's a compromise. It was a different option that was put on the table to assess.
And, Katie can stay around a little bit longer if you want to go into more detail about that particular question, but I've got about 20 people waiting for questions. Mel, I know you've got 5 people waiting, but there's a lady up here. I just have to go that, and Sanjeev's got 3 down the end there, and there's about 6 over in this corner. So lady or man, okay, red T-shirt, thank you. I'll take you off my list now. Good, excellent.
No worries. My name's Ben. My question is that the Eastern Freeway and Banyule region for option A sit largely in a valley in which vehicle pollution will not easily disperse. Why are you even considering bringing an extra 120,000 vehicles worth of exhaust pollution into the most heavily populated area of any of the options?
It's a long list. Yep.
Yeah, so I guess there's probably a couple of aspects to that. Firstly, the 120,000 is largely not new traffic. It is actually taking existing traffic from the arterial road network and actually putting them in the link. There will be. So no,
sorry,
what we are talking about is 120,000, or in that range, 120,000 trips on the link. That's not necessarily saying that they weren't actually going through those roads anyway, so through the arterial road network. There will be some new ones, absolutely. Some that will be attracted through the area. But the majority of the trips that we're talking about are ones that would actually be using the arterial network and working through that. That's why we're seeing these reductions on the roads, and that's why we're sort of seeing the congestion benefit. So when you look at it from, I guess, an environmental point of view, and Katie's sort of best to talk about that, but you can have cars sitting at signals and on arterial roads and spewing out fumes, and trucks as well, sitting there in that scenario, or you can have them in a tunnel. Or a freeway where they're not stationary, they're actually running more efficiently, and they're not creating as much emissions. And when they're in the tunnel, the emissions then are captured and funneled up and dispersed. So it should be a net benefit with those types of issues. And I think from where the environmental effects would go is to make sure that the emissions out of any of those ventilation structures meet EPA requirements.
If
No, I was trying to say that the majority, and I did say that not all of them, but I said the majority are actually coming through there already.
And I could remind everyone that there's bits of paper over there to write more questions down if you want more detail, and there's emails and a survey, lots of other opportunities, and you can write a question on a blank bit of paper and council are collecting it too. And I've got so many people waiting. Mel, then Sanjeev, we're going to take at least 4 from the back, and I know there's lots of people waiting up here, but they're missing out down there. So Mel?
My name's Peter. I've been to 3 meetings so far regarding the link. At each meeting, we're told that placarded loads are not being considered for the tunnels. So my question to either Vic Roads representative or North East Link representatives, why are we not looking at technology for tunnelling that will take placarded loads?
Okay.
I can answer that one again. The issue with placard loads is that they're currently banned through legislation, and that legislation comes through essentially through WorkSafe, and they are informed by the MFB. From a technical design solution, we think there's a lot that we could do within the tunnels to actually design the tunnels to cater for a higher number of placard loads, maybe not all of them. There's about 9 different types of what they call dangerous goods vehicles and different classifications. From a technical solution, what we would be looking to do with any solution that we put forward is designing that so that we can cater for the majority of those, but we can't change the legislation as the authority. There's things to be worked through with MFB and with WorkSafe, and we'll continue to have conversations with them to see what we can do to soften that stance, to take some of those placarded loads through. But we'll be trying to make sure that we design the tunnels to be able to cater for a high proportion of them, and then see how we can go with legislation going forward. And maybe it doesn't happen straight away, but there may be a softening of that stance into the future, and then we can get them in. So that we'll try and control what we can control, but we absolutely see the point and understand the issue of doing whatever we can to take as much freight off the arterial network as possible.
Thanks, Sean. So Sanjeev, thank you.
Thank you. My name's Fred. I've got a couple of questions, or a 2-part question. Firstly, you keep mentioning that you're going to be doing environmental effects statement after a solution has been selected. What happens if the environmental effects, let's just say option A, which I think is the silliest option, but let's just say option A is selected, and you find an environmental effects statement shows that there's hydrology and geological issues which make it prohibitive. What happens then? Do you pick another alternative? And the second thing I wanted to know is about future-proofing. You've just admitted that option A will not increase the capacity of the current road system. But I know that option B, C and D, because it's duplicating the Mullum tunnels, is likely to be able to increase the capacity of the overall freeway system. How important is that? And have you considered this when you consider the outer ring road is coming in, a lot of development to the north, and a lot of those dots you had indicate that they want to head east, not west. So can you please answer those two, please?
Thank you.
So when we do the environment effects statement, we will need to base that on a reference design. That design will be developed in conjunction with the impact assessments that are done by our whole range of specialists. So that will include groundwater, it will include surface water, it will include a lot of detail. There is a lot of technology out there around road building in really complex environments. We will be drawing on the experience and knowledge of constructors that have done that sort of work. And that's part of developing a project like this. If we get to the completion of the environment effects statement process, which I also must say will involve all of you. The whole part of an environment effects statement process is that it is consultative as well. So you have an opportunity to see the information, to see the geology, to see the groundwater, to see the air, to see the flora and fauna, all of that work whilst we develop it, so that if we get to the end and we haven't addressed the issues, the Minister can require us to go back and look at it again. That is part of an environment effects statement process. It has happened on other projects in the past where they've had to go back and look at it again, or they haven't been approved. So the Minister for Planning will look at that in a lot of detail.
And just on the second part, I think you said that I'd said that we weren't providing additional capacity in the road network with Corridor A. If I said that wasn't my intent, what I was trying to say to the answer to the previous question is that it wasn't essentially a lot of new traffic. Now I did say that there is going to be new traffic going through the North East Link, but what it was actually doing was taking a lot of traffic from the surrounding network and shuffling them onto the link, and then you free up capacity on those other roads and make those other roads better for people that are just using the arterial road to do their normal travel. So there would be an absolutely, with every one of these corridors, there is an absolute net increase in capacity on the road network. And we take your point around the capacity of the Eastlink tunnels, and that has actually been considered. We've looked through that and we've done analysis of that, and we have considered that when we're looking at as you said, B and C avoid that, they go around that. So they are positives to those alignments, absolutely.
Thanks, Sean. Mel, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sean, you made the presentation and you showed the density of the traffic coming in and out, origins and destinations. And leveraging on part of the question that the previous gentleman raised, it seems to me we need a new corridor, not increasing the capacity of the existing corridor. We need an option, sorry, I need to make a couple of statements first. We need an option that allows the traffic in the furthest northeast area to have a viable solution, and we need to move the traffic off the Western Ring Road. So can you please explain to me how option A can provide the benefits of getting the traffic off the end of the Western Ring Road, providing a solution to the northeastern regions in an expanding city where a lot of people are starting to move out to that area, and how does that stack up against the options of C and D, because B's are nonsense?
Okay, that sounds like a question.
So I guess it's a pretty detailed answer to get into that. It's a sort of a pretty broad question.
How can we keep that succinct?
Yeah, that's the issue.
That's
so
yeah.
I mean, our analysis that is in that technical summary paper does show that that corridor A does do what you're talking about. It does take traffic from the M80 and from the Ring Road and does allow that to get those other patterns, those other trip patterns, and get that connectivity through. And part of the benefit of Corridor A and part of the reason why Corridor A does provide that additional release of congestion on part of the network is those trip patterns that I was talking about before, and those plots that you mentioned. And when you look at those destinations underneath the Eastern Freeway, it uses the value of the Eastern Freeway to actually get that connectivity. The other options, when you're talking about B and C, for example, and you make your statements about B, that's your opinion. But because of where they go down and they connect to Eastlink, they don't have multiple access points along them. So it limits their connectivity and their accessibility to get people to the destinations. And that's where, when we sort of run these things through a model and do our analysis, that's where Corridor A has been providing that greater relief, because it actually gives people a better accessibility, because once they use Corridor A to get to the Eastern Freeway, there are multiple interchanges along the Eastern Freeway where they can get directly into the areas that they want to get to. So that's sort of how that is providing that benefit.
So I have to take a question from Facebook, because those people are just as important as the people in the room. Maybe they're looking after children or something. So
yeah, I'm not Facebook, but I'm representing a question from Facebook.
Yep.
It's a short question. How do the experts, it's from Victoria, how do the experts see that they could tackle the issue of people not wanting to use the toll roads and then avoiding those and going on local roads?
Interesting question.
Yep, and that is an issue with every toll road. I think importantly with what we're talking about here is in this project, the North East Link Authority, we're not going through this process and this project to end up with a solution out there that nobody uses. And we've seen some really bad examples of that in the north, in Queensland and New South Wales, where they've come up with the wrong model and they've to justify their position, they've got high forecasts that don't eventuate. We are absolutely committed to making sure that this project actually is used. And in setting any toll structure and any toll price, and that's a lot of work yet to be done on any of that, is going to be making sure that any solution provides value to the user, because we want people to use it. We don't want it to be sitting there. We don't want to pay a lot of money and have a bit of an infrastructure sitting there empty. So we'll be absolutely making sure that the solution and the tolling solution that's developed will be making sure that it provides value to the user, to attract them to use it, and also that it provides value to the local community, so that we can actually get those trips out of local community and onto the new asset.
Thank you. I have a question here from Black Hat, then I'm going to Sanjeev and Mel, then I'm coming back to Brown Jacket. Okay.
Yeah, I understand that the original CityLink contracts had a revenue protection clause for Transurban. Given that option A is merely a duplication or an alternative to CityLink, is there any legal opinion out there or has anyone sought a legal opinion as to whether option A will be subject to civil action by Transurban to recover lost revenues?
Can you answer that question?
It's probably best that I'm not the legal person to be able to provide any advice on that.
Is that a question that we take on notice?
I think so. No, I understand the point. But I'm not in a position to answer
I don't
that.
think anyone can answer that question. I'm not at all a roads expert, but I think it's something that you could write down. Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have that person on the panel to answer your question. Mel and Sanjeev. Sanjeev first, then Mel.
Hi, thanks for your time tonight. The new, whichever option is built, the roads will be tolled. Are you able to categorically rule out that any part of the existing Eastern Freeway will be tolled as part of this, any solution?
Yes, I mean, there's been, through any of the analysis and any of the work that we've been doing, there's been no discussion or mention of tolling the Eastern Freeway. Can I sit here and say absolutely no? That's not my call to say. So that's obviously a call for the politicians. All I can say is that it hasn't entered any of our thinking in terms of the work that we've been doing.
Aaron Lee here. Tom, I for one very much appreciate your voice on this matter. In your presentation you mentioned that I think it was Infrastructure Victoria haven't been involved, and also that this is fast becoming very much a political situation. How do we stop that? How do we get Infrastructure Victoria involved and stop this from becoming political?
If I knew the answer to that, I wouldn't. Well, I think we just have to put pressure on our local politicians. It's the only way we have to show that this is not a project we want. We don't want our community divided. And it's political pressure. That's the only thing that'll do it. But getting back to what Sean said, he's commented on what I say, we have made many mistakes. Like, we've looked at the cost-benefit analysis when they widened the Monash the last time, 5 years ago. Predicted time savings for 30 years, never met. Now they're widening the Monash again. Western Ring Road, when it was built, time savings were factored into that. They were never met. They haven't built a freeway yet that has solved our congestion problems. The problem with Melbourne is every arterial road in Melbourne is full. If they build more freeways, you get more cars. At some stage, you must get off it. If every arterial road is full, and there's no way they're going to make any more arterial roads or duplicate the arterial roads. So is the answer really building more freeways? And we talked about a transport package. Where is the transport package in this? And why aren't we looking at it for $8 to $10 billion, which this could cost? If you look at what Western Australia's done, they've put train lines down their freeways, and they underestimated how many people would use it, and they have been a huge success. Why aren't we looking at some of those things? Why aren't we looking at an airport to the airport? Because I always think, how many cars are on Rosanna Road of people from the eastern suburbs driving to the airport, dropping someone off, and then just driving back? So 2 trips on Rosanna Road that could be replaced by 1 trip on a decent rail link. So we're not looking at these things.
Sounds like you've got lots of content for your emails to local politicians and Infrastructure Australia. So Sanjeev, thank you.
Thank you. My name's Catherine. I've lived in the northeast of Melbourne for most of my 5 decades, and my family's been in the area for the last 100 years. And I know that's nothing compared to the Indigenous people who've been caring and living in this country for 40,000 years and more. I think I've read the local community right that most people here would vote in a plebiscite for the rights of nature to be given paramount importance over the rights of the community even. So, given that platypus, etc. have been sighted in the Plenty River as recently as last year, can you please advise us how the lessons from environmental impacts on the Mullumbulling Creek have been used specifically to improve the processes that you will now use in this case, given this could arguably be stated as the most environmentally sensitive area of Melbourne?
Question?
Yeah, I'm not sure I actually...
I think, is your question about whether we learn the lessons from previous assessments and looking at how the Mullumbulling tunnels were built and how they worked through construction? Yes, we will very much so draw on experiences, particularly from the EastLink project, we have members of our team who were there from the start through to the end. So we're very much learning those lessons. It is one of the most sensitive parts of Melbourne, yes. Is it the most sensitive? I'm not sure. I haven't studied all of Melbourne. But there are, Victoria is very unique. We have Ramsar wetlands. We're some of the biggest in the world. And we have some really unique environment. And that is at utmost important to us to minimise our impact on that. That is my job as responsible for the environment effect statement and as an environmental scientist. That's why I do what I do, is to get those outcomes. So yes, we will be learning the lessons and it'll be very important.
Thank you. We have about 7 minutes left and I've got about 20 people. So the maths doesn't work. I'm not an engineer, but not everyone's going to get to ask their questions. Mel, then brown jacket, and then lady behind with the paper. But please ask a question so that we leave here at 9 o'clock.
My question's to the Vic Roads representative tonight, who's got off lightly at the moment, I think. It's acknowledged this will be a 10-year project. I'm just wondering what Vic Roads what are their immediate actions they're going to do to help ease the congestion on Rosanna Road. The graph tonight was damning. There's been a number of practical solutions put forward, but I haven't seen anything happen. Can you please respond?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I guess there's a couple of things. In terms of Rosanna Road, we've already done a number of things in terms of practical safety measures, trying to deal with some crashes that are occurring at intersections. So we've implemented a number of those. So we're really conscious of community concern around safety along the corridor. We're looking at a whole range of other things in terms of safety. I know there's issues raised around poles being struck by trucks, so we're looking at things like relocation of some of the poles, and we're doing some investigations at the moment. So we're trying to deal with those safety issues. In terms of the speed limit, I think Tom raised the issue earlier around the speed limit. We've made a commitment to review the speed limit along sections of Rosanna Road to see what might be possible. So we've made those commitments as well. In terms of broader issues around congestion, we're looking at options around how we deal with incidents along the corridor. So what we typically do on our freeway network, we have an incident response team that actually helps to deal with incidents as they occur and move them quickly. We're actually looking at expanding that, or have been expanding that to our arterial network, including along Rosanna Road, to try to deal with some of those congestion type issues. And some of the things we're trialling at the moment is putting up messages, variable message signs at either end to actually try to deal with when there are incidents that occur. How do we actually redirect all this congestion? How do we redirect some of the traffic to other particular routes? So there's a whole range of things that we're trying to do in the short term to try to make some improvements, but we recognise it's a significant corridor, it's really busy, and the purpose of a northeast link and each of the options that will be considered is how do you actually draw a lot of that traffic in the longer term off the route. In the short term, we're really focusing on how we can improve the safety along that corridor.
Thanks, Vince. Brown jacket.
Yeah, brown jacket here. Another question for Sean, surprise, surprise. Very well spoken, in a very awkward position.
Question?
My question is, we've heard tonight there's strong suggestions that Corridor A is the North East Links Authority's preferred route. A few questions ago, Sean sort of implied that was the case. Can you provide clarification in this public forum if this is the case, and if the concerns of the community are actually taken into account, or if it actually does come down to the dollar, number one? And number two, what guarantees do we have that this consultation, which we're all going through at the moment, will actually be considered as a priority and not just an excuse to appease the crowds?
Where was the question? I couldn't quite see
question.
Oh, there. Sorry, I was trying to find you the whole way. Sorry. Brown jacket, right. So, look, if I gave the impression that we had a preferred, that wasn't my intention. No, look, the authority has no preference. We have no preference. We have no recommendation. What's happened is we've looked at 4 corridors. We've done some work on 4 corridors. We've assessed those corridors, and we have given the ticks and the crosses and the things, and we've got our technical summary on how that analysis is coming out. That analysis is plain to see that Corridor A does work better on a lot of those areas, but that is not a position or a preference from the authority. And in terms of taking on board the community feedback is absolutely paramount to us. That's why we've been doing this. That's why we've been at these sessions. We want to really hear and understand it. And a lot of that is making sure that the way we're analysing this is right. I mean, a lot of people are saying, well, I want this corridor, not that corridor, and those kind of things. But let's pull it back and say, what are the issues that we're trying to solve? Are the objectives that we went through up there right? Are the principles that we're trying to make sure that we achieve right? Is the type of analysis that we're looking at, so the themes that we had in the newsletter, are they the right themes that are important to you as a community? If we can get that feedback, that really helps us do our analysis better and make sure that the analysis and the work we're doing meets the community's expectations.
Okay, now we have a few more minutes and there were several people waiting over here, but I just want to do one quick check with Sanjeev or Mel, because they were waiting for a long time down there. So then we'll come back over here because there's several. Anna was nearby, some of the people. Can you come back up, Anna? Thanks. Yep.
Thank you. Great session tonight. My question actually relates to construction.
We have 2 minutes.
Yep.
Yep.
A number of the tunnels actually run under existing housing stock. What guarantees are in place, number one, that the existing housing won't be damaged? And secondly, if it is damaged, if any of the housing is damaged, what compensation is in place for the residents?
Thank you.
So I have just worked on the Metro Tunnel project and looked at that actually in the environment effects statement. So I'll talk to that as a recent relevant example. So we will do, for that project, we did geological modelling, a lot of analysis to work out ground conditions. We've modelled the different construction techniques to predict things like ground movement and vibration. So that will be a key part of setting performance requirements for the contractor. We'll also be doing condition surveys of properties prior to construction and agreeing those conditions of those property reports with property owners, and then there will be mechanisms to reassess at the end of construction. So when we're doing big projects like this and tunnelling projects, property condition is a really important part of that. The Metro Tunnel has set requirements around property condition reports, around engagement with property owners, having ongoing mechanisms for property owners to contact and communicate with the contractor if there is issues occurring. But we wouldn't be suggesting or engaging a contractor to propose a method that was going to cause significant impact. That will be part of the requirements from a technical perspective, let alone from an environmental and social perspective, to construct in a way that is going to have that minimal impact at surface. That's why we go through the expense and the effort of tunnelling.
My timekeeper here, my watch says 1 minute to 9. And if there's one part of my job I have to do is that we have to finish at 9. I know you all want to keep talking, but at the request of the Mayor, I have one question for you. If on a scale of 1 to 10, you can all clap, I know you can all make a lot of noise. If 1 is, I'm not going to complete the postcard, I've had my say, I feel like I've done everything I can to contribute to this consultation, I want you to applause at number 1, I'm not going to complete the Banyule postcard. Number 10, I am definitely going to complete the Banyule postcard that's coming out, and I want you to clap. So we'll go down to 1. I've provided all my information. I don't need to complete the Banyule postcard. Any claps? Shall we go right up to 9 or 10? Okay. So you are all aware of how to continue to give your views. The Banyule postcard, several options on the North East Link Authority's website, heaps of opportunities over there, a graffiti wall as well as a bit of a matrix to indicate how you feel. And I'm sure some of the council staff and North East Link are hanging around for a little bit tonight. But I would like to thank our panellists for answering your questions or endeavouring to answer your questions. And give yourselves a clap for coming out on a cold night and being so interested in your own community. Yep, thank you. That's it.